All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another episode of On the Border with Sheriff Mark Lamb, retired sheriff now. And today we've got a very hot topic across this country, and we got two great guests. One is a dear friend of mine. I still call him Sheriff Tim Turner, but he is now Representative Tim Turner. He represents the 15th District, Legislative District in Oklahoma, and he was the sheriff of Haskell County from 2017 to 2022, and then he took a job at the state investigations bureau, and then he left for that and got elected. He got into politics. So I don't know what he was thinking, but he's a good man, a great American. He's done a lot of good stuff. Was elected by his peers as the top sheriff, I think in 2020, Sheriff?
That's correct. Sheriff of the Year in 2020.
Sheriff of the Year in 2020. But he's been a long experience in law enforcement, starting as a dispatcher, moving through the ranks, ultimately becoming the sheriff. He's also now the elected representative. And I'll tell you what, you're not going to find too many better men than Sheriff or Representative Tim Turner. I don't know how we're going to do this. I'm probably going to call you Sheriff the whole time, Tim.
That's just fine. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate you and the work you've done and you're continuing to do. And then we've also got Director Donnie Anderson, which we just had a chance to kind of meet for the last 10 minutes. I'll tell you what, I'm excited about this podcast and the knowledge and the passion he's going to bring to it. Donnie Anderson is the director of the Oklahoma State Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs Control. He is also a native Oklahoman. And I know, Tim, you're actually from the Choctaw Nation, right?
That's correct.
All right. So I know Director Anderson is a native of Oklahoma. He's had a law enforcement career that started 29 years ago in Garvin County Sheriff's Office. During his time at the Sheriff's Office, Director Anderson served as both the sheriff and the undersheriff. I must just call him both sheriff now. I didn't know that, sir. This is great. He then served as the task force commander for the District 21 of Drug and Violent Crime Task Force, which includes Garvin, McLean, and Cleveland counties. And before his appointment, Anderson served as the Oklahoma Inspector General for Oklahoma Department of Corrections. He graduated summa cum laude from the Central Christian. I don't have the rest of that. Is that the Central Christian University?
Central Christian College.
College. All right. Well, gentlemen, very esteemed track records. You guys have served well your communities and your state, continue to do it. And it's an honor to have you today. And we're talking about a very important issue that I think is facing. Certainly, we've gone through it here in Arizona, but we're facing it all across this country. I know I went out to South Carolina a couple of years ago to help them combat against a movement to legalize marijuana. And Oklahoma's facing the same things. And we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to start off with you, Director Anderson, if you don't mind. The state of Oklahoma has allowed medical marijuana. What impact has that had so far for your state?
Well, it's had a very negative impact for the state of Oklahoma. And please understand, people get this confused when they say medical marijuana. We're really recreational. By definition, it's called medical marijuana. You could have gas pains and smoke marijuana. So there's no real, we didn't line out and say, hey, you have to be a cancer patient, you have to have this ailment, that ailment, or any other ailment. Basically, and understand it's not a prescription. There's no doctor that can prescribe it because it's still federally illegal. So it's just a recommendation. So in Oklahoma, I could stop my toe on a rick of wood and say, hey, I'm in pain and I need marijuana. And there's some quack that's going to give me a recommendation to have marijuana. So understand it's really we have the most liberal marijuana laws in the union. We really do. To call us the red state of the union, we have the most liberal marijuana laws. Also understand, I'm not sitting here saying that there's not a purpose or a place or a lane for medical marijuana, because to a degree, I think there is. Who am I to say a person that has cancer that doesn't help them, give them a better quality of life for however long that life looks? Who am I to say that's not true? Because if that's what they say, so be it. My problem is when it's so liberal that anyone and everyone can have access to it, you start seeing the negative effects, just like what we have seen here in Oklahoma. One, we opened up the door to all the transnational criminal people in the world to come to Oklahoma and grow marijuana, because it is, understand, a multi-billion-dollar industry. And that's what we do. But what we've seen more Chinese than any other group, anyone. There's more Chinese, transnational Chinese in Oklahoma growing marijuana than there is anyone from Oklahoma. And then we have some cartel, we have some Russian, some Bulgarian, and some others like that. But predominantly it is Chinese. And that is the biggest concern, because if people don't realize, and if you don't understand, and listen, I didn't understand a lot of stuff. I came to the Bureau 5 years ago and seen what was going on and said, hey, this ain't right. We're not the biggest fans of the Chinese government. We are their biggest adversary. This isn't happen chance that just all these Chinese showed up in Oklahoma to grow marijuana. They've been actually working, the Chinese government has been working for some time in reference to this particular thing. This is how they're building back their infrastructure in China, is through things that go on here in the U.S. But so for me, it's so much bigger of a picture than everybody says, oh, you just hate marijuana. You're just, no, 1970s. Listen, I wasn't even born till then. It's not that. I'm not a Woodstock guy. I'm not just, oh, you're going to smoke, it's the devil's lettuce, you're going to smoke it and you're going to die. I don't believe that either. But what I am is I'm a 34-year guy in public safety. I can't sit here and tell you that everything linked to marijuana is just unicorns and rainbows, because it isn't. The things that have happened in Oklahoma, one, we've seen all the foreign ownership that's bought up our land. They've also bought up land. And once again, I'm talking about people who have direct ties to the Chinese government, has bought land in areas where no one should be allowed to buy land, close to military installation units, close to fiber optic lines that if they were to be cut, it would shut down your banking and communications. And I also believe, because of what we have done and through our investigations that we have done over the last 5 years, this isn't by chance. I think this is very well designed. I think there is a real agenda going on here, and it literally keeps me up at night. It scares the bejeebies out of me what's going on. But there's so much more to it, and there is a bigger picture of it. It's not just, someone sitting around smoking weed. That honestly is not my concern.
I love that you brought all that up, because I don't think people understand the depth of the criminality, the transnational criminality that is involved in the marijuana trade, whether it's medical marijuana or recreational marijuana that has been legalized state by state. I don't think they understand. And I thought you very well put it there, just how the impact of having the Chinese nationals coming in, buying up land. We see now this kind of operation with the medical marijuana and the marijuana grows and running these things just exactly where a lot of these Chinese nationals have landed. And it's scary to me too. Not just that piece of the crime. Tim, I want to ask you, because you'll probably get this a lot, and Director, you're feel free to chime in on this. We kind of touched on this before we came live. And we're not live, we're filming this, but you know what I mean, when we actually started recording. A lot of people will say, their argument will be, well, this isn't a dangerous drug. Nobody goes out and hurts somebody when they're under the influence of marijuana. And I would counter that by saying, my 22-year-old son, my 11-month-old granddaughter, and my daughter-in-law were all killed by somebody driving under the influence of drugs, marijuana, and alcohol. So, Sheriff Turner, what would you say, when people say, well, this isn't a violent drug? What's your response to that? And I'd love to get the director's insight on this as well.
I think it's twofold. I think it's a gateway drug to everything else. I think it's where it starts, especially with our youth, the way we're packaging, the way we're doing things with the edibles. We're promoting it in Oklahoma. And now we're starting to see a lot of our youth. We're starting to see a lot of our folks that are just experiencing things for the first time. So that creates the first issue. The second issue is that when we have dispensaries on every street corner, and I have to give props to OBN and our local agencies, because they're shutting those dispensaries down left and right. But what we're seeing is folks are buying their medical marijuana. They're not following the rules. They're not going home and consuming at home. They're consuming going down the road. They're consuming at different recreational parties that they're going to. They're getting behind the wheel, and they're killing Oklahomans. and they're killing Oklahomans daily. And, at that point, just like you, you've lost loved ones in this deal, and it makes it personal. But it also makes it personal in Oklahoma because we're a state of 4.1 million Oklahomans, and in my district, I have 40,000 people. So I will tell you, I know probably 2/3 of the people in my district, and every time we have one of those incidents, it affects not just a family, but a community. And, Oklahoma in 2023, they showed that we didn't want recreational marijuana. And I believe that if it was put back on a ballot today, they would show they didn't want medical marijuana because what we have is a medical statute with a recreational use.
Yeah, very well said. Director, you told me some statistics before we went and started recording. Could you mind sharing those statistics?
Absolutely, Sheriff. And I'm glad you asked the question because, understand this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's a lot of people don't want this to be known. But you look at what's happening in Oklahoma, and I will tell you, just from 2019 to 2023, since the legalization of the medical marijuana, we've seen a 327% increase in driving under the influence. In 2023 alone, marijuana was a top drug detected in the fatal drug accidents. The top drug, not alcohol, not methamphetamine, which we have more people dying from methamphetamine and fentanyl than any other drug, but that was the top drug found in those fatal drug accidents. But you also have to understand whenever you have that fatal drug accident on our Oklahoma highways, it's not just a person driving under the influence; it's a family that they're running into and killing as well. That's it's bad when anyone loses a life, but whenever something as silly as being high or under the influence of any intoxicant takes out a family or anyone else, that's really what's troubling. And I will also tell you, in a 5-year average, and this is also a very troubling number for me, Oklahoma Poison Control Center said from the age of 0 to 4 years old, we've seen a 2,529% increase in calls to the Poison Control Center because of from an infant to a 4-year-old getting their hands on edibles or marijuana. That's just ridiculous. Now, that's a little problem too, don't get me wrong. But once again, we're saying when you say that and you market these things to look like M&Ms or gummy bears, I mean, that's why you see that stuff. That shouldn't even be allowed. I mean, there's a reason why it's marketed to that age group. Shouldn't even be allowed. But we haven't even touched on the violent crimes that we've seen. We have seen such an uptick on homicides directly related to marijuana. I'm talking about execution-style homicides, and I can go over case after case after case where this is affecting Oklahoma. It's now normal in Oklahoma to have multiple homicides directly related to a marijuana group. I mean, and we think that's normal now. Shouldn't even be allowed. I mean, it's just some of the craziest things that's going on. We've seen a huge uptick in human trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking. We have seen probably the biggest uptick in directly related to marijuana grows in the state of Oklahoma. Once again, we haven't got into the other things that we're seeing, like what it's doing to our land, the chemicals that we're starting to see from China that's not even approved to be in the U.S. And there's a reason why, because they get into your water tables. They can destroy a lot of things, including our crops. There's just so much to this that the average person doesn't even understand what's going on under their own nose. And these people are very good at what they do. They're very strategic at what they do. They infiltrate everything, including our politics. This hasn't been easy. I've received death threats. Listen, the people, the cartels, the people like that we deal with methamphetamine and fentanyl, I've never received a death threat. I've received more threats over marijuana than anything else that we do. And
that's such a great point.
It's just such a big business here, and they have infiltrated and worked very hard at what they do as far as lobbying and infiltrating government and even infiltrating my own agency. They have attempted to. And are you familiar with Salt Typhoon, Sheriff?
With what?
Salt Typhoon.
No.
Salt Typhoon, and it came out in 24. That's where the Chinese government hacked our telecommunication system in the U.S. Well, one thing that hasn't been talked about enough is they hacked our wire our wiretap system, our CALEA system. That's where all law enforcement in the state and
Right.
the U.S., we do wiretaps to break down these criminal organizations. Now, why would the Chinese government, specifically my agency, why would the Chinese government be interested in what I'm doing unless they had some interest in what I'm doing, which is in the marijuana industry, also fentanyl, methamphetamine, because that's where the precursors come from. But they hacked that system, and I was brought into a briefing by the FBI. A lot of it can't go into, but I will tell you this. I was told that my agency was compromised. What's scary, Sheriff, is that we believe, meaning our government, whether they are standing out front saying or not, we think they're still in there. We still think they're in our telecommunication system. It's not just our and this is another reason why you should be concerned. Why are they wanting to know what we're doing? But why are they in our telecommunication system? Why are they in our internet system? Because if there ever was an act of aggression, they shut everything down. But they're in our system. They're controlling, whether you want to realize this or not, they're controlling almost everything. And they can, at a flip of a switch, they could literally shut us down. But they can. Our systems.
Sheriff, I think there's something important to address that Director Anderson said. The other thing that I think is very important that Oklahoma has is we've got several corridors. I mean, we got I-40 and 69, which is really the crosshairs of America. It goes east to west and north to south, right in Chakotah, Oklahoma. But about 45 miles south of there, we have one of the largest ammunition plants in the United States. And then you think about that, then you go to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City or Midwest City. And when you get to Tinker Air Force Base, it's one of the largest Air Force bases that kind of does a little bit of everything. And if you look at the people who are around those facilities, it makes you wonder why we're allowing foreign ownership of land, which we've outlawed, but we don't have any bite to the crime of it. So it's one of those things that they're buying up land, they're compromising our law enforcement. They're doing things, and I say the Chinese are doing things that make Oklahoma vulnerable to, one day if they want to take it over, they can take it over.
Well, man, Sheriff, you guys are bringing up some. There's so much to dive into there. I'm glad that you brought up the violence that's associated with it, whether it's killing people on our streets or the violence that's associated with the sell and the marketing and the behind the scenes of it all. And I just, the Chinese influence, if anybody's listening to this, they've got to be just absolutely, they should be very concerned with what's going on with them tapping into our telecommunications, buying land around our bases. These are all extremely concerning and important issues that I think you guys have brought up. I mean, we could dive into each and every one of these for, it's mind-blowing that we would allow this to happen. And yet we've done it. And I think you kind of touched on it, Director, just the intentionality of what's going on, what's behind it. Why are we allowing this to happen? You've kind of touched on it, Director. We're talking about, since the advent of the medical marijuana in Oklahoma, what type of, we see the criminality behind the cartels and the Chinese criminal organizations. What kind of black market has that opened up? And if so, is it the Chinese and the cartels that are running that black market? Well,
so pretty much the market is the black market. I mean, marijuana in the state of Oklahoma is basically worthless. If it's not leaving the state, you're not making any money. So what's happened is because we allowed all these grows in the state of Oklahoma, it pushed the guys that were doing it right, couldn't make any money, so it's pushed them out of business. So you don't have a handful of legitimate marijuana growers in the state of Oklahoma. And I'll put it in perspective this way. Oklahoma has 4 million people in the state of Oklahoma. Less than 10% of that population, which is a little over 300,000 people, even have a medical marijuana card. So, but whenever I came in here, we had over 8,000 grows. California, a state of 40 million people, only had 2,500. I mean, we're producing that much marijuana in the state of Oklahoma. Even with all this enforcement that we've done, we've produced all this marijuana. So pretty much the market is black market, just to be honest. Compare us to Arkansas, which is pretty comparable to us. They have 8 grows in their host state. They don't have this problem in Arkansas. So what I'm telling you, if we had 10 to 15 grows in the state of Oklahoma, we'd have a lot of waste still to destroy. We don't need, and like we're down, we went from a little over 8,000 down to 2,000 grows right now. I mean, I'm hoping by October we're right around 1,000 of this year, but we still don't need 1,000. We still have 990 too many grows. So pretty much it's black market marijuana. And like I said,
those are
$1 million industry.
Sorry, I didn't mean it. I was just going to say those are staggering numbers. You know, I felt like I was a pro at Oklahoma marijuana because I watched Tulsa Kings, and I thought I understood it. Now you guys are blowing my mind on here. I think you're right, Director, is getting it down where Arkansas only has 8 and you guys are at 2,000, over 2,000. That just puts into perspective just what an issue they've created there in Oklahoma with the advent of the medical marijuana. It's just, Tim, Sheriff, as a sheriff and now as a representative, are you seeing the effects of this black market, which sounds like everything's black market? Are you seeing the effects of that on a state level as a representative now?
Yeah, you know, we hear about it daily. We see it daily. You know, I can tell you that still not being in law enforcement, but being in law enforcement now, we still monitor what, you know, the Bureau's doing, what our drug task force are doing. Sheriff's offices across the state are doing remarkable jobs of identifying these grows, hooking up with OBN, working them on the proper side. So it's an everyday deal. I think, you know, just last week, Director Anderson's crew did one in my district, pretty large grow. But over the last year, there's been multiple grows in my district, but not just my district. It's across the state of Oklahoma. And I think, you know, talking to Director Anderson, he can correct me if I'm wrong, but we're probably doing 3 to 4 to 5 a week right now. And the majority of those are by Chinese nationals. They're by, you know, folks that don't need to be here. And we can go back to 2020 when we did one in Haskell County, Oklahoma, that the main target was out of Colorado, but was a Chinese national who was documented to be in China at the time that I did an undercover deal on him right here in Haskell County. So it just shows how they're able to manipulate paperwork and they're able to get through the cracks. And that's what Oklahoma's seeing. Our price of land has went up. Now that Director Anderson and them are shutting a lot of these grows down, the land's not worth anything because there's been so much chemical used on it that our farmland is washing up. And it would take years and years and tons of money to get that farmland back to where it can either be grazed or even be used for hay or whatever, because we've allowed this to come in and pollute Oklahoma lands.
Guys, this is I don't think the majority of the people that are going to be listening today, even in law enforcement, understand. Even in Arizona, you know, we don't have the type of land you guys do in Oklahoma where you can grow things. You know, we're a hard desert, so any of the grows that we have are probably going to be in a greenhouse somewhere, or in some of the northern parts of the state. But boy, this is very concerning. That what we kind of touched on this, Director, and for you too, Sheriff, but we'll start with the Director. The criminality of it, just the violence that comes along with it. We've got the Chinese influence on it. We've got the Mexican cartel influence on it. Is it spilling over into all the communities now as well, with the criminality, the criminal element that comes along with the marijuana trade in your state?
Oh, absolutely. Everything from violent crime to white collar crime. We really have had a lot of homicides related directly to this. We've seen these underground casinos pop up, and that's where they do a lot of their sex trafficking. But we've seen a lot of just, I hate to call it a brothel, but that's basically what they are. We see them pop up everywhere, and they're bringing these girls from China or other countries over the southern border, bring them here to Oklahoma, and they sex traffic them. A lot of them don't even know where they're at. And when we talk about all these different crimes, and I don't care who a person is or where they're from, one of the most deplorable things that we see is the sex trafficking. And it is so sad that in a society that we would treat any human like that. It's just some of the worst things we see. And two, when you go to these things, it's hard to understand, what these look. It looks like when you walk into this 80-acre farm, it's like you're walking into a third world country. I mean, you have people living in shacks with dirt floors. And when we talk to these people, when we brief these people, that's normal for them. They're living just like they do in China. A lot of people don't realize poverty in China is rampant, and people live very, very hard in China. But when people come over here, and some of it is they come over here on their own will, and then some of them are forced. But then when they come and when we try to talk to them, it's really hard to get them to cooperate, because they know that their family back home, just like what the cartel does in Mexico, but they know that their family back home is in harm's way if they talk to us. So that is a huge, huge problem. Not only that, there is a huge language barrier because the Chinese government has infiltrated so many different avenues. We can't just get anyone to translate for us. For example, one person that was translating on a quadruple homicide for the courts, we ended up arresting him as a part of a straw ownership in these roads. I mean, you just got to be really, really careful with any of this stuff that you're dealing with, because it's so directly tied to the transnational criminal organizations when it comes to the Chinese. But every crime you can think of, we've seen an uptick on, basically. But it's spilled over, and we're having homicides all the time.
And this is like when you live in somebody else's place, you don't always respect it. And these folks that came in illegally have no respect. They don't have allegiance to this country, so they can, how they use it and abuse it doesn't matter to them. And when you're into the criminal element, I'm glad that you brought up the human trafficking piece of it, because that seems to go hand in hand with the drug with the drug organization, whether it's the legal marijuana grows, the medical marijuana grows. It seems to always have an element of human trafficking. And Tim, I wanted to ask you, because you're a member of the Choctaw Nation. We had 4 reservations in my county alone. Obviously, Arizona, we've got a ton of Indian reservations, and most people don't realize that we have zero authority on those reservations. I know that Oklahoma's got a little bit different because you guys have reservations all throughout the state. Are you finding that these criminal elements are setting up shop and finding safe harbor in a lot of these reservations, kind of like what we're seeing in Arizona, where the cartels have kind of set up shop for trafficking and moving people and drugs into communities, and they found safe harbor on these reservations? Are you seeing the same thing in Oklahoma?
No, so it's kind of ironic. The Choctaw Nation, their code, their criminal code, marijuana is still illegal. So what you see is a lot of. I mean, yes, we do have a lot of grows within the nation, and basically within the 5 civilized tribes, being the Choctaws, Chickasaws, Cherokees, Seminoles, and Creeks. You do see a lot of grows there, but it's still illegal. Marijuana is still illegal in their criminal code. So when it comes down to a native possessing marijuana, you see that kind of less, but they're still possessing meth, fentanyl, things of that nature. But what you're seeing more of these folks coming to these rural areas and hiding, because we do have so much rural area within these nations. But that's where we partner. We partnership with OBN. We partner with the Choctaw Nation, and our local law enforcement is thriving because the nation doesn't want that within their reservation either. So, we're not seeing it as much coming here to hide because it's a reservation, because everybody still has cross deputizations and they're able to work. And as long as they're not native, they still get tried in state court. The only people that go to native court is native citizens. If you're non-native, you're still going. So an illegal citizen that comes here that sets up shop, they're subject to criminal charges just like a non-native would be.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Well, Tim, you guys are working at, you see all this stuff going on. We hear what the director's saying. I'm hearing what you're saying. What is the state legislature doing in Oklahoma to combat any of this? Or is the state legislature making any moves on a state level to try to thwart this, what's come along with this medical marijuana in Oklahoma?
So, I have the privilege to office with my colleague, which is Representative TJ Marty out of House District 75. And TJ is the chairman of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Controlled Substances. And TJ's worked with Director Anderson on multiple things to try to tighten up the medical marijuana statute that we have. But again, it was voted on by the people, voted in by the people. So, we've created statutes such as straw ownership. You have to be a 2-year resident of Oklahoma to have a license. They were able to get a moratorium put that no new license can be issued. But the backside to that is now the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority is allowing license to be sold. So if you have a license, you have a business, you can sell your business, you can sell your license, and then there we are. So there's a lot of those functions that we're trying to tighten up. The foreign land ownership purchasing, it's there is a statute in place, but it has no teeth behind it. There's some regulations, but there's always a way around that regulation. So the two things that I think we need to see that I think even we can work on with the House, and I don't think it'd be an issue, is one was put some teeth into the foreign ownership, the foreign land ownership. The other is, Oklahoma's very fortunate that we have basically a wire transmitting bill that allows $5 to be charged to put back into the enforcement action. And we tried to run a bill this year to increase that. What we need to do is we need to keep hitting these illegal transnational organizations. We need to keep hitting their pocketbooks. We need to keep taking their money, and we need to force them out of Oklahoma, or we need to force them out of the United States. If we want to have a safe Oklahoma and we want to have a safe United States, let's send these criminals back to where they come from, and let's quit plaguing Oklahoma. Our Speaker of the House says it every day, and it's a motto that I've taken really, really deep. Is and I think every elected official should go by this, but it is. When we leave these offices, we need to be doing better. So what we want to see is we want to see Oklahoma better than it was when we got here. And I think that's very important. That's what I live by every day is that, hey, come next year, I might not be a representative. I might get beat, but I will tell you this, when I wake up, I can say I left Oklahoma better than it was when I got here.
See, that's why I said you were a great man, Tim. You sheriff, I'm glad you're serving. You continue to serve on the state level beyond the sheriff. And we need, you're so spot on. Is our job is to leave it better than what we got it, and try to make it better for the future. I appreciate the stance you've taken. And Director, from that law enforcement on a state level side, do you guys have the resources that you need? Obviously, I know what the answer is, but do you have the resources that you need to combat this problem effectively? And would you like to see more federal government, more ICE, some of the ICE interdictions on some of these places? It sounds like it would be easy pickings for a lot of these folks that are here illegally to kind of clean up some of these grows through that way. What is your thought process on how do you solve this issue on a long-term basis? I know you guys are fighting it every day, but what's the solution from a law enforcement standpoint long-term?
Well, so I will tell you, if we don't make some changes, we can. So my agency does at least one of these a day. And this, whenever we talk, you have to understand this is a huge undertaking when you do one of these grows. I mean, it takes a lot of personnel and it takes a lot of resources. We have the resources. The legislature has been very, very good to us. And the problem is the legislature, OMA, tried to build an airplane while it was in mid-flight. It was already flying. So they've tried to try to catch up with it. One of the problems that we have right now that I can tell you that if it could be addressed, I think will help tremendously. And that's this moratorium. There's a moratorium where no license is supposed to be sold, or no more licenses are supposed to be, you're not supposed to be able to get any more license. But we're allowing these people, these criminal elements, to sell their license, and they're selling them to other criminal elements, which infuriates me. You can't sell any other license you got. And people say, well, Donnie, you can't do that because you're not allowing people to sell their business. It has nothing to do with your business. Sell your business, but it's still considered a CDS. That's the only reason I'm involved, because I don't give a license. I give a registration because it's a controlled dangerous substance by the federal government. So we have to meet those guidelines. OMA gives a license. I have nothing to do with that. But why are we allowing them to sell their license? You're allowing one criminal to sell their license to another criminal. And if we wasn't doing that, we would probably be down to that number that I'm talking about. But as long as we allow them to continue to sell that license to another criminal, that's what we're going to have, criminals in the business. There is a legitimate market and there is a legitimate business here. We're not there yet.
Sheriff, I'd like to address one thing. I appreciate Director Anderson, telling legislators that, hey, he gets what he needs. But I think it needs to be very important. The Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics budget from the legislators is $3 million a year. $3 million a year. This year, there was a 2% cut across the board, which, if you take that $3 million, it's about $60,000 that Director Anderson lost. So the rest of Director Anderson's money, and as I said, as the vice chair of appropriations and budget for public safety, it cost him about $45 million a year to operate. So we ask, where does that money come from? Well, it comes from selling registrations. It comes from licensing. It comes from interdiction unit. But as you see an agency grow, and it has to grow because of this industry, we're still not adequately funding the Bureau of Narcotics what it needs to be funded, but it's because we don't have the revenue to fund it. But I think it needs to be addressed that Director Anderson and his crew is doing an outstanding job with the limited resources they have and finding a way to generate revenue to make sure that Oklahomans are safe from controlled and dangerous substances.
Yeah. I'll tell you, my hat's off to both of you. I mean, I've known this industry and I know what it does, and yet I'm still just blown away by just the scale of what's going on there in Oklahoma and just the job that you guys have in front of you. I want to just ask one last question. We do this on behalf of FAIR, the Federation for American Immigration Reform. And, you might be saying, well, we're diving into this marijuana trade. How have you seen that marijuana trade? And we've kind of already touched on it, but just real quick, if you could encapsulate it, how have we seen that this marijuana trade has been negatively impacted by the amount of illegal immigration that we saw over the last 4 years and for decades, but really hyper gas on the fire that we saw over the last 4 years? How do you see that those two have meshed together? And how has that impact been for the state of Oklahoma?
Well, listen, if it wasn't for illegal immigration, you wouldn't have these farms in Oklahoma, because that's who's working these farms in Oklahoma. And it's not, and don't, whenever we first started this, I'll tell you the demographics of how it changed. When I first started this, and it was during COVID, I came in as director right at COVID. Whenever we went to these farms, we saw a lot of older transnationals because the restaurants and stuff were shut down. But immediately we started seeing them being replaced with very young men. And they didn't look like migrant workers, how they dressed, how they appeared, even how they like whenever I would walk through, some of them would stand at attention. So that was extremely alarming. But it just changed the demographic of what we've seen changed. And it was because of the ease of getting people over the border into Oklahoma. And then people talk about border states and all this stuff. I don't know that there is such a thing as a border state anymore. I mean, it's everywhere. We have, and I don't know what our population is because it's not calculated like that, but I can tell you the uptick in our illegal immigration 4 years ago has been astronomical. It has slowed down tremendously, but everything that we've seen, including the ease of fentanyl and methamphetamine, the price of methamphetamine has went through the roof. While we were paying $20,000 for a kilo, now you're paying $20,000 for a pound. A kilo is 2.2 pounds. Now you're paying that for just a pound instead of a kilo, because it's getting harder to get, because we're tightening up at the border. We got people who move massive amounts of methamphetamine and fentanyl that we're working undercover deals on, can't get it right now. And I even reached out to my partners in Texas. Hey, are you seeing this yet? Well, they're not really seeing what we're seeing yet, but they will. But we've seen what happens when they're open, and now we're seeing kind of what happens when you start closing them, which is a positive thing, not a negative thing. But because of illegal immigration, a lot of what's going on is because of that.
Yeah, I always like to say, they may have closed the door to the hen house, but the fox is still in there. And that's why removing the people that have come into this country illegally is so important for not just, like you said, for every state, because every state has effectively become a border state, like you said, Director. So, Tim, I'll give you the last input on that, and then we'll get you guys out of here, because I know sounds like you got a hell of a lot of work to do out there in Oklahoma. So I don't want to tie you up any longer.
Well, Sheriff, I want to say that, Oklahoma is not Oklahoma is a border state. It's an open state. And what we need to do is we need to focus on the deportation of these criminals that are here, that are operating. What we see and what we hear from some politicians that we have is, hey, let's go to the schools and let's start with the schools, because we go to the schools and get those kids, then we get those parents. But we have enough. We can send ICE agents with OBN every day, and we can start sending true criminals back to where they come from. At some point, we're going to see a deportation of everybody under this administration. But the president said it. We've said it as leaders in Oklahoma. We want to see criminals back to where they belong, and that's not in Oklahoma. Then we can work on everything else. But right now, Oklahoma's overran with transnational organizations, and let's start deporting their asses back home, and let's work together to make it happen.
I love it. Thank you guys for so much for the insight you've given us today, for the passion you bring to your jobs, for your patriotism, for fighting these evils in this country, and especially in the state. You guys are dealing with some big issues there, and we appreciate you guys being on the front lines fighting. Director, Sheriff, I'd love to come out there. If I don't know if you guys do this, but it would be nice to come out and actually do boots on the ground. Maybe even going out on one of your raids to kind of just showcase just what this looks like. Maybe we talk offline about that, but would love to come out and really put some eyeballs on just how this looks, and not just talk about it, but hey, this is the reality. Here's the camera showing what we're doing. These are the people working these farms. It's hard for these folks to deny what's happening when they see it with their own two eyes.
Sheriff, we'd love for you to come sit. And just me talking about it doesn't give it justice. I'm going to tell you something. Even seeing pictures doesn't do it justice. But when you pull up to one of these locations and you feel like you're in a third world country because there's raw sewer running out on the ground and dead carcasses of animals laying out there, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe this is in the U.S. I would love to have you and entertain you and bring you out and let you see what this looks like here in Oklahoma anytime you want. It's an open invitation. Me and the representative would love to have you.
Well, I'm going to take you up on that offer. That'll make me feel like a cop again for a day. I'll feel good.
And put you to work.
Yeah, there you go. I'm a worker. I'll love to do it. Well, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for doing this, and thank you, everybody, for supporting the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Remember, you can check us out at fairus.org. And thank you, FAIR, for making this podcast possible, where we can bring in great experts like you've seen today with Sheriff/Representative Tim Turner, Sheriff/Director Anderson, and for their expertise. And guys, keep doing God's work. We appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for joining us again on another episode of On the Border with Sheriff Lamb. God bless everybody.